Director of IOB and the incoming convener of the SLBC, Srimati. Through Mahesh Kumar Bajaj, Executive Director, Indian Bank. My friend SML Swami, Regional Director, RBI. My colleague in the Planning and Development Department, ACS, Vikram Kapoor, ACS, Hansraj Verma, government officials, NABARD officers, bankers, my friends, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this annual event, which I think I'm attending now for the second time. Every time I learn something new, and today has certainly been enlightening in many ways. I must first say that this is a very kind of role reversal situation, because as best I can tell, in the past, our Finance Secretary, currently ACS, Muralindran, would be more likely to attend these meetings and SLBC meetings, and the Finance Minister would be away doing other things. Nowadays, I seem to attend the meetings more and free up the ACS Finance to work on the department work. And he's busy doing the government's work. I also want to acknowledge, though we get shawls in many different events, as soon as I saw the shawls being given here, I was reminded of my school days where I studied in the Nilgiris in boarding school. And I said, these look like shawls from Ooty, from Nilgiris. And then the CGM said, maybe they're from the northeast. And then he corrected himself and he said, no, I found out they're from Ooty. So it's good that my memory is still working properly, going back 40 or 50 years. I also want to formally welcome our incoming SNBC coordinator, Madam, who gave a very brilliant and insightful speech about various aspects, including the value of technology and credit validation. I'll touch on that in a minute. But let me first step back. As I said in my remarks, I think the last time, credit is essential to any growing economy. In advanced economies like the United States, roughly 85% of all credit comes out of the markets and only about 15% comes out of the banks. For various reasons, largely because we don't have such an efficient dispute resolution mechanism or a good, strong set of precedents. We have a highly underdeveloped market credit mechanism relative to the scale of our economy, relative to the total demand for credit. In fact, the availability of unsecured credit is very, very low compared to almost any other country, at least a developed country. So in that sense, as I said during my experience in commercial banking, particularly in emerging markets, bank credit is the driver of growth, because there isn't very often an efficient market credit mechanism. In that sense, in my banking career in the emerging markets, we used to assume that if GDP growth was going to be X, we should expect the loan growth to be 2X, largely in the large corporate and other sectors. Here I'm glad to see that while we're expecting GSDP growth about 15% notional, that the credit growth is targeting about 19%. It's not great, but at least the ratio is relatively good. Also, that the MSME sector is targeted for about 28%, which is very important, because that's really where the bulk of job creation and therefore follow-on benefits that come out of employment come. I was just checking with the CGM if Tamil Nadu is second at 110% CD ratio, what is number one? And Andhra is number one at almost 140%. And then, of course, there's after that Karnataka and then Kerala, because there's a lot of overseas deposits, remittances in Kerala. All that makes sense, but as I expected, and I was validated by the numbers, one of the reasons that Andhra is so high is because the deposit base is so low. So the deposit base of Andhra is less than half the deposit base of Tamil Nadu. So the same about 1 lakh and change difference between credit and deposit translates to 40% there and only about 10% here. But as good as things are, I would say the two things I observed. One, that the credit to green energy seems to be flat to marginally down. I'm a bit surprised given the push we have, but maybe you know something I don't granularly. The other thing I should say is that the use of technology is going to be the game changer, as the SLDC convener said. In my constituency, for example, before the broader state level initiative started, with the help of Indian Bank, we are very thankful for that, I started my own system of pruning and validating and cross-registering, set up my own software application, mobile, in my constituency, and we found a lot of discrepancies in the SHGs, a lot of multiple members, a lot of replications, a lot of cross deficiencies. I should also say, without picking the number, that this data purity project that we initiated after coming to office has yielded huge savings, both in the June loan waiver program, where we were able to really identify a lot of wrong beneficiaries. We were able to do that for the agricultural loan waiver program, but that was post hoc. We couldn't do anything about it because the predecessor government had already given up the, given releases, and then we were able to find how many of those had been fraudulent. But in the June loan, we caught it ahead of time. That saved us lots and lots of money. In the SHGs, just yesterday, I got a report from the Director General of Audit, which is a new post. To my knowledge, only exists in Tamil Nadu, no other state. But that was one of the reforms that I read out during my budget under the guidance of the Chief Minister. And we are profoundly reforming the nature of internal audit within the government. And I'm glad to see that this was one of the early benefits where we saved hundreds of crores by doing proper cross-referencing. In fact, maybe I'll just take a step back and say philosophically, though the Chief Minister, all of us in the party, in the Dravidian movement, we talk about social justice being one of our key drivers, the philosophy that activates us when we come to public life. We must remember that there is a profound difference between economic justice on the one hand and social and judicial or legal justice on the other hand. We are all, I'm sure, familiar with the image of the Lady of Justice. The Lady of Justice holds a scale in one hand, but is blindfolded. And in the case of the law, the Constitution, and social justice, it is crucial that the lady stay blindfolded. That is to say, the law must apply equally to everybody. You must not have different outcomes based on your caste or your religion or your gender or your any other variable. Therefore, justice should be blindfolded and the scale should balance. But when it comes to economic justice, it is exactly the opposite. Unless the blindfold is removed, there is no way for us to balance the scale. Unless we know who is making how much money, we don't know what the rate of taxation should be. Unless we know where there is economic weakness, we don't know who should get a subsidy. We simply cannot implement economic justice keeping the blindfold on. We have to know what is what, we have to have data. We have to be able to nuance and tailor our actions based on the status of the beneficiaries. Otherwise, there is no way to achieve economic justice or a leveling of the scales. In that sense, data gives us so much value, and the continuity of data over time, as the executive director said, gives us even more value. In fact, earlier this year, I was in Singapore for some meetings. At a different point in my career, I had served in a bank based in Singapore. Though I was a global head, the headquarters was in Singapore. And I had done a lot of work with the MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, on some committees, and of course they were our regulator as well. But this time I stopped by to see the gentleman who runs the FinTech initiative. And one of the really good initiatives they have, which they're promoting to many emerging markets and developing countries, is a blockchain technology where MSMEs can cross-validate each other based on their record of payments, receivables, deliverables, frequency, lack of, failure to pay at the right time, consistency, etc. So you can get credit worthiness many ways, but 80-90% of the transactions that could go to proving credit worthiness or the health of an institution are not visible to everybody. And that's what I think the ED was saying. Broadly, the equivalent of having a syndicated database can be achieved many ways, including in blockchain cross-validation. So technology gives us a lot of insight, and it gives us the ability to fix one of the greatest weaknesses in our system. I said it a slightly different way at the last SLBC. The Honorable Union Finance Minister said it a slightly different way when she was in Chennai recently, a few days back. I said, though the targets are being achieved in terms of volume of credit, the diversification is not being achieved. If you look at the number of clients, we are significantly behind, 30-40%. Of course, it's much easier to lend more to the known client and the known track record. But for economic development or justice and for inclusive growth, we have to expand the net. We have to expand the number of people who are getting access to this. And there the biggest limitation becomes KYC, credit validation, etc. So these technologies can do that. The Union Finance Minister said, though the tax collections in Tamil Nadu are satisfactory to me, I worry that the target of number of individuals in the net is not going up. She said it from the collection side. I say it from the distribution side. So for all these, I think the value of technology and of institutional memory that persistence of data gives, which no human can replicate, should be the basis of driving a lot more expansion, diversification, and therefore economic inclusion and justice. I'll just end by saying that I'm very happy to note that every year the targets in these plans have been met or exceeded. I'm a bit concerned that the CGM's presentation showed, so I didn't have my glasses with me, so I may have read it wrong, but it showed that this year it is only about 30 or 40% of the way, and we only have about 3 months left. But maybe that's because the roll dates of the loans come closer towards the fourth quarter. The fact that you have a track record of over-delivering for 3 years, I'll take it on faith that you'll do it this year also. So with that, let me commend all those whose work, as seen in the presentation, over multiple stages, and I'm sure many weeks and months, has culminated in the issuance of this very useful and valuable report. Every time I see it, I'm actually amazed that there's something like it, because I've not seen any other. I mean, though there are, in the US or in Singapore, the Federal Reserve, the central banks have wonderful data. Much of it is market data and bank data. It is not ground up data. And so this is, in my mind, quite unique still, at least in my limited experience, for something that is so granular, coming from the ground up, by district, by sector, and aggregating into this report. So I congratulate everybody who worked on it again. I thank you all for coming for the discussion today.